Yeah, that's probably what it had.
All right, it is 6 o'clock, so we'll call the meeting to order. I want to make note that we abide by the Open Meetings Act, and that is posted on the back wall. And also, if you have the yellowish orange sheets, bring those up to Jody if you want to speak. And with that, I will turn it over to Dr. Huck.
Yes, does the board wish to vote on the board president at this time?
Yes.
Secretary, please. The first vote this evening is still 3 votes for Ellison Zablosky and 3 votes for Kenders. Does the board wish to vote again? All right. Once again, we're 3-3. We will vote again. this point in time, we have 4 votes for Ellison Sablasky and 2 votes for Tim Bruce. At this point, we will turn the meeting over to Ellison to finish with the votes for officers.
We can switch mics next time. Okay. I believe the next item on the agenda is the election of the vice president. I now ask for nominations.
I nominate Steve Shannon.
I would vote for nomination cease.
Nominations will cease. Jody, you want to take a vote?
Jeremy?
Nay.
Tim?
Nay.
Kara?
Yes.
Christie?
Yes.
Steve?
Yes.
Allison?
Yes.
We have 4 votes for Steve, 2 against.
Once again, just as Jody done on that, we have 4 votes for Steve and 2 votes nay. So at this point, then Steve is vice president. We
Yes.
have secretary treasurer. Past practice is the secretary has been appointed, treasurer has been elected. It's up to the board.
Someone have strong feelings about the secretary appointment?
I don't.
I'd like to appoint Jody McCoy as secretary for this 1-year term for the 23 year. Go ahead. Do you want to do a roll call or?
I don't believe there's a second, but certainly you can vote.
Let's just go ahead, Jody, for just the minutes and make sure everybody has a chance to speak up either way.
Will do. Jeremy?
Yay.
Tim?
Yes.
Kara?
Yes.
Christie?
Yes.
Steve?
Yes.
Allison?
Yes.
62.
Okay, motion carries. I think next is nominations for treasurer. Can we have nominations for treasurer?
I nominate Jeremy Dick.
And I'll nominate Tim. Jeez.
2 nominations. Anybody else?
I'm going to withdraw my name. Thank you.
Anybody else? Okay, Jody, please call the roll.
Jeremy?
Yay.
Tim?
Yes.
Kara?
Yes.
Christie?
Yes.
Steve?
Yes.
Allison?
Yes.
All in favor?
It has been a practice of the board to approve the slate of officers. The officers at this point in time is Ellison Sablasky as president, Steve Shannon as vice president, and Jeremy Dick as treasurer. And the board has appointed Jody McCoy for secretary. Is there a motion to approve this slate of officers?
Motion to approve.
I'll second.
Jody, please call the roll.
Allison?
Yes.
Jeremy?
Yes.
Tim?
Yes.
Kara?
Yes.
Christie?
Yes.
Steve?
Yes.
I believe that,
Please go ahead.
okay, I was gonna say, I believe the next item is committee appointments. It's probably buried here in the practice and procedures section. So this is the point of our organizational meeting where we approve the current board policies and regulations. We indicate who the depository is for the school district, which would be I3 Bank, formerly Bank of Bennington. The newspapers of record, the Douglas County Post Gazette, the Daily Record, and we've also utilized the World Herald. We will review the policy on school-sponsored media. And we'll also review the order of business, and that's included within our bylaws. Previously, we've done the conflict of interest statements, I think at our last meeting, and folks have signed off on those. And we will appoint the superintendent as representative for the ESU number 3 for the advisory council, and that's pursuant to policy as well. And we will also appoint the superintendent for BPS for all state and federal programs. And then I think the last item is the committees.
That is correct. So motion to approve 1 through 9.
Correct. Is there a motion?
Motion to approve 1 through 9.
I second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Jody, you want a roll call?
I'll do a roll call.
Just be sure.
Okay. Allison,
Yes.
Jeremy,
Yes.
Tim,
Yes.
Kara,
Yes.
Christie,
Yes.
Steve.
Yes.
All right, I believe the next item on the agenda is committee appointments. By policy, that is up to the discretion of the president. Historically, we've had the officers serve on the policy committee, and so I don't see any reason to change that. So that would be myself and Steve and Jeremy. You guys are willing to work on the policy committee, the 3 of us. Curriculum and American civics, I would like to appoint Kara and Steve and Christie to serve on that committee. And then building and finance, Tim and I have had success on the building and finance committee working together. I'd like to continue that. And then obviously as Jeremy as treasurer, I think it makes sense for you to be involved in those discussions as well. So that's okay, we'll have the 3 of us serve on that committee. And then one item I'd like to discuss tonight is just I'd like to have a more formal policy where we actually are meeting regularly, perhaps the week before our board meeting. And that way we can have some sort of a committee report to speak up at the board meeting. So we'll work together to find times for everybody that'll work with schedules to make sure that those happen. And especially with the policy committee, Jody, if you wouldn't mind helping us kind of map out how we get through all the policies over a certain number of years to make sure that we've covered them all within a reasonable period of time, and then we can bring smaller segments to the board for approval throughout the year. That would be helpful. I think that's it for committee appointments. Does anybody else have any discussion on that item?
Can you repeat your recommendations for policy committee?
Sure, the officers, so the Allison, Steve, and Jeremy.
Thank you.
And those are our appointments. And so there is no motion needed for that.
I believe the next item on the agenda is public forum. I see a few of the golden sheets, but wanted to ask if anybody else is interested in speaking. It's not too late. Please grab a sheet at the back of the room. Bring it up to the front. Just as far as ground rules, we like to ask folks to keep their time to about 5 minutes or so. I'll try to keep time. I hate interrupting people, so you can just, I'll try to do so gently and just kind of let you guys know when you're getting close to the five-minute time frame. We ask that you keep personnel items out of the discussion for public forum, leave those to the administration, and we will take your comments on our advisement. We typically don't interact during that period, and I know folks often ask why, and that is really because that's not listed as an item on the agenda. So if we get into discussion on that, there may be other folks that are interested in that topic, and they weren't properly noticed that we're going to be discussing that in the evening tonight. So if we could start with Rich Carlson, you want to come forward? And if you'll just state your name and your address into the microphone so the folks that are watching remotely can understand who's speaking. Thank you.
See if I heard you correctly.
My name is Rich Carlson. Address is 10420 North 189th Avenue, Bennington, Nebraska 68007. Is there any other information you need?
That's fine. Thank you very much.
Okay. This is what I'm asking the 3 bodies that's in this room. We have the voters in the school district. We have the voters in the school district. We have the board, which works for the school district. They're the boss. We have administration. And I don't hold that lightly, because you just don't get a doctor's degree just given to you at the candy store. I respect the person and I respect the position. But we're the fastest growing district in the state of Nebraska, I believe. Am I right or wrong? But we got some growing pains and some stretch marks. But we're gonna do what's best for the kids, the young adults, and get them prepared for the future. Now, I'm asking everybody to put their personal views away and do what's good for the community and the school district. And that means, number one, there was a representative, a teacher up here last week, and I tried to listen to every word that was said at this meeting, last meeting. And if you want to quiz me and test me, I got a good memory. You don't want to push it. That individual had the backing of all the blue shirts that were here and stood up after he had a speech. The only thing I heard was classroom, 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 classroom. You realize Tom Osborne, when the football team went down to Nebraska, he told every one of them, he said, you're here for an education. To get a doctorate's degree or to get an education, you're lucky one of you is going to go pro. So it's education, education. Now, if this school district's got growing pains and there's a lot of people that's hurting out there, you build them a school. You build them four walls or whatever, and you build them a classroom because that's all they asked for. Because the person that was up here, I'd heard indirectly, and correct me if I'm wrong, he's actually wants the tennis and all this stuff. But let's get honest. We only need one thing. Classrooms, 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 and get the job done right. That's all I'm asking for you people, and to get a school bond that can pass. Because if you don't find out what the public wants and you just think it's what you want, it's going to be down, down, down. That's all I ask. And for myself, I'm going to take it to the Lord in prayer, because in this country it still says in God we trust. And I thank you very much. And we've got a great school district. I think you've all have done a good job. But none of us got holes in our hands and feet that we're nailed to a cross. So if we made a few mistakes, let's get them corrected and get these kids a building. We already own the land. I've got to give the administration credit. We had 3 meetings. And it was explained we really didn't appreciate a dump for a school. We already own the land. It's already clear. And the superintendent's been very nice. I've asked to talk to him twice. He's never lied to me, and he's been very polite to me. And I've been polite to him. But you know, I'd love to drive to school in a Lamborghini too. But I had a 52 Chevrolet that sat in the driveway, and I rode a bus. 10th, 11th, and 12th grade, that car was only for work. It wasn't to go have fun after school. So let's get back to our priorities and get these kids to school. And if I'm wrong, tell me straight to my face. I don't throw any daggers behind anybody's back. I just call it the way I see it. And if I'm wrong, I'll be the first to apologize. Thanks, Rich.
Thank you.
And I do respect the decision too, and the person. Okay? You don't just get those things.
Next up is Tracy Baker.
Thankful. I was in here last week, so my apologies. Okay, Tracy Baker, 7806 North 157th Street. First, I would like to welcome the new board members. I hope this will be the beginning of a new era of transparency in the board doing the job they are voted into office to do, which is to represent their constituents. The fact that the only incumbent who ran for office this election cycle landed in last place, and the bond was struck down by a very large margin, will I hope this sends a message to the board and the district that the majority are not happy with the status quo. Second, as you look to discuss and consider the qualifications for the superintendent search consulting services, I hope you keep in mind that whomever you choose should represent your constituents' values. In order to help achieve this, I feel using a local firm, or at least a firm from within our state, would help to ensure that someone that fits Nebraska values is selected as our next superintendent. Finally, over the next few months, I plan to come with a subject that is important to me and others I have spoken to within the community. I invite the board to conduct research on these matters prior to the meetings so that you have some background information on that subject matter I plan to present. For the February meeting, I will discuss parental frustrations regarding the lack of transparency from the district, the district's continued word salad and fear mongering in their communications to the public, and a plan for our financial situation, which I hope would include to no longer pay out contracts to employees that were incapable of doing their job, and what that means for future bonds. In March, I will discuss the district's current review of its school-wide management and discipline policies. It would seem evident with current events within the school year, one being a student bringing a gun to school, that whatever we look to in regards to discipline practices, we need to continue to include zero tolerance. In April, I will discuss our social emotional learning curriculum and student climate surveys. I will be discussing the ability to continue to opt out of the curriculum going forward, or even better yet, a review of the second step curriculum being utilized and its possible removal. Let me just quickly read an excerpt from an article from Learning for Justice, a partner of Second Step. In 2019, Learning for Justice published an article, "When Schools Cause Trauma." Just the name of that shop's name, it is laughable. Here's a quote from the article. "Things like homework and walking straight in a line or talking in the hallway are traditions teachers hold on to. I've seen children being embarrassed by adults in their schools for not turning in homework or for talking too loudly in the hallway. That is violence towards kids. So a curriculum reuse and their partners feel like asking students to behave at school is violence towards them." This statement has an impact on my March subject for the review of the school-wide discipline practices. When our district is using a curriculum that aligns itself with such beliefs that asking a student to stand in a straight line and be calm and quiet is violence towards them, one wonders why our students are out of control, disrespectful, and violent. Because if you cannot ask a child to stand in a straight line, I'm assuming you cannot ask them to behave in a classroom. In May, I will be discussing our need for a policy to notify parents when a student asks to be referred to at school by either different pronouns that would not normally align to their biological gender, and or if a student wishes to be called on by their given name or nickname. A parent should not have to learn these scenarios by coming to school for a play or a sporting event and hear their child called by a different name. Knowing the mental stress children are under when they feel they are born in a body that they do not feel they belong in, should be treated no differently than if a child were to talk of self-harm, an eating disorder, or general anxiety and depression. These would without a doubt be brought to a parent's attention, and a child wishing to socially transition should be no different. I look forward over the coming months to hopefully have open and meaningful conversations in regard to these subjects. I really do, in my mind and heart, wish the best for our community, students, and staff within our district. Thank you.
Thanks, Tristan.
Next up is Bob Kaminsky.
Well, I would like to, Bob Kaminsky, I'm a resident here in Bennington, 68007. And I would just like to start by saying good evening, especially to the new members, welcome. And I hope you have a great tour. And then also to the community here, I wish you all a good evening. For the board, I hope you heard the message loud and clear in November. That just under 70% of the community took time out of their way to vote no on a $153 million tax. I believe the lack of transparency and the lack of engagement with the taxpayer were driving forces to the November result. My request to you is before we move forward with another bond, with another request for taxpayer dollars, that we have a full, open, and independent audit of the books to share where we're at today, where we're going tomorrow. I believe we must get back to the basics without bankrupting the taxpayer. And as the gentleman said earlier, we need to focus. It's not about supporting the child in the education. To focus on the skills, the trade skills, STEM, until we can pay off our current debt. I believe, and I may be wrong on this, but I think we're only doing interest-only payments on the previous 6 to 8 bonds that were out there and that were approved. So I say we need to avoid things that are nice to have, but we cannot afford, especially in the economic times that we're in. The $12 million plus swimming pool. And these were last year's dollars, not taking into account the inflationary time we're in. The $3 million tennis courts, the $5 million for, a football stadium expansion. I ask for the community, for those that are retired, those without children, those whose children have graduated from the school, and for those with children in school now. We cannot make Bennington so unaffordable that folks move out of this great community. So again, I ask, before we move forward with $153 million tax, or if it's greater, that we stop, we open the books, we have a transparent conversation about where we're at and how we're going to catch up with past debt. And with that, I thank you for your time and welcome your board members. Thank you.
And the last one is Carol. Carol Dussel-Cerny, please.
Hi, I guess I'm going to be echoing some of the same things that I've just heard. Congratulations again and welcome to all the new board members. And I've been asked to please listen to the messages that were sent in our election. They are important. It has never been about what some people would say, oh, if you don't want the bond, you're anti-education, and that couldn't be farther from the truth from, I'm going to say, every person that I talk to. And for myself, it's about, we want to educate our kids, we want to do a good job, but we have to be able to afford it. I mean, I can't tell my kids or my house, we can't keep spending money without a way to know how we're going to pay the bills. We can't just keep charging that credit card or borrowing more money without knowing how we're going to pay it off. And I think that was one of the driving forces that caused us to not have a bond issue passed, was we have so much debt, the highest in the state, almost the highest in the nation. That is a concern to people because they have to figure out how to pay for it. Their check is getting smaller, and that's going to be huge. So please listen to the voters on what they said, because it does make a difference. And if we want that new school, we got to be able to afford it. There has to be a plan there. I think transparency is going to be key. If we're not transparent and something doesn't change there, the voters are going to want to see that something really has changed and it's not just lip service. So I think those to me are the two priorities that just have to happen. How are we going to get our finances in order? And are we going to be transparent about what's happening? I think we also, in our superintendent search, I would love to see transparency as to like who decided that we were going to use a search firm. I'm not saying we shouldn't. I'm just saying that announcement was made before the vote. When the announcement was made, the media were saying that we were going to be using a search firm before the board had said yes, they would accept the resignation. That seemed kind of odd. So that decision was made by somebody. I've never heard by who. I haven't really heard anything as far as what that process is going to be and what firm and who's selecting and all of those things and what cost is going to be associated. So that's going to be, I think, also a key to who will be leading our school in the next year. So I just ask that you listen to the voters, listen to what people are telling you, because it does make a difference.
The next item on the agenda is the consent agenda. Kara and I, we've had bills for this month. I did not have anything specific to note that was out of the ordinary that I wanted to discuss. Did you?
I did not either. I did want to, one of the things that is on the consent agenda is that Mrs. Whitney Fagan will be leaving us. And I just want to say a couple words. She's been with us for 6 years as Director of Student Services. And I know her vision in developing an inclusive education where all students grow and thrive has been exceptional. And as always, she's been dedicated to providing the best possible education program for those identified students. She's always so positive, and I think she passes that along to so many people, and we need that positivity, and I appreciate that. Been so good to staff and to families, and to develop those special services programs for the children. Whitney did an exceptional job as the main administrator responsible for the pandemic protocols and handling all the recommendations from healthcare and trying to adapt those to our district and blend those, which I know was difficult and was stressful. But just want to let you know how much we appreciate you, and we wish you the best. I know you're going to be here for a few more months, but I want just to say those words. Thank you.
Thank you, Whitney. Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved. I need to read that out for you, sorry.
Is there a second?
The second.
Jody, call the roll.
Christie?
Yes.
Steve?
Yes.
Allison?
Yes.
Jeremy?
Yes.
Tim?
Yes.
Kara?
Yes.
I was gonna say something about discussion quick. I just had looked through the
Sure.
minutes. That's all right. It's approved. I just want to make sure Lynn's name wasn't in there. I checking back on all of them always, and her name was not in it. I suppose we better make sure Lynn's name gets put in there. She resigned last month.
For resignation.
Yeah.
For
it was not in
resignation
there.
under personnel. Should be in the minutes.
It should be in. the
Yeah.
personnel report.
It wasn't in the minutes, so make sure that gets in there. Yep.
Thank you, Tim.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, I think the next order of business is unfinished business, and this item is discuss, consider, and take action on the superintendent contract amendment. This is a carryover item from December, and so I'd like to invite Derek Aldridge with the Perry Law Firm to come up and help the new board members get up to speed on what we're voting on and provide some insight into the numbers behind it.
Thanks for having me, Derek Aldridge with the Perry Law Firm. This was a resignation. I got resigned in December, which was accepted by the board. But the board ended up pushing the actual amendment of the contract down to this month. You have before you, as part of the agenda item, that contract amendment. And really all it does is address one particular paragraph in the current contract that talked about no penalty for release or resignation by the superintendent. However, the board does need to establish in writing an earlier effective date. So really this amendment would memorialize that earlier date and accepting the resignation.
So essentially moving the contract from 2 years to 1, so he will resign as of 6/30/23.
Correct. That's all it does.
So that is what the motion to approve the amendment would do, is to shorten the term of the contract by 1 year.
Correct.
Does anybody else have questions on that piece for Mr. Aldridge?
Well, yeah, I do. Well, I don't necessarily have a question more than a comment. I've been going through this, so I did read the contract and then I asked for a prior contract too as well, so I read through that. My biggest concern was the additional leave days. That's part of the amendment, and I think most people, if they look at that, they would probably have the same question. Because the original contract, it has it as $1,000 for the first year. And then we're looking at an amended contract now with no penalties, but then a $57,000 additional leave amount. I know year 2 had about a $67,000 in the original contract, but in this amended contract, it's $57,000. So by appearance, from someone new like me, it looks like we're basically given a $57,000 bonus for quitting a year early.
And I think what he's talking about is the 50 days of sick leave that are in his contract that he's entitled to payment for if he doesn't utilize those. So that's a per day modification of that, plus his vacation.
And I think the numbers you're pulling from the Schedule D.
Yeah.
That's from the Superintendent Pay Transparency Act, Schedule D.
Correct.
That's posted on the website.
Well, it doesn't have a schedule on it, but it's a definitely an Excel spreadsheet.
Schedule D is what everybody refers to it as.
Okay.
And so you're looking at what got posted last year for Schedule D, and then what has recently been posted with the amendment. You're talking about the difference, right?
Right.
So there's nothing to change in the amendment. We didn't address anything on days, so that, I'm not sure that I can speak to what that number is. It hasn't changed from his original contract. So if his original contract says,
$1,000 the first year.
correct, that hasn't changed.
Right. So then the question then becomes, so when it comes to contracts, so I would assume, right, and then when I got into it and started reading into the payout and when the additional leave days, I guess the accrual leave days. So is there a record, an accounting record? Because the way that number comes out, it comes out to 50 days exactly to additional sick days and then 20 days of vacation. Which if he's owed that because he hasn't taken it, I have no problem with that. It's just for someone like me coming on, I don't know, right? You know, is it accrued or is it not? You know, and if it is, then where do we get that information?
Yeah, that would be, I mean, you're gonna record that information as you take it, I'm assuming, so.
Right, that is recorded with the, it would be with Len Larrabee with the records. And so at this point in time, can't tell you how many sick days, very few have been, and 3 vacation days that we've taken so far.
So the 50
that
days
record
would be
is
accrued over your entire time here though.
Capped out.
It has to be capped out at 50. It caps out at 50.
Yes.
Right. Okay.
And those records are with the district.
But that's what it is, right? That's what that number is coming from. Is it 50 days? Okay. And then the 20 days of vacation.
Anybody else have questions on this? Thank you, Steve. Appreciate your questions.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Aldridge. All right, is there a motion to approve the amendment to the superintendent contract?
I move that the Board of Education of this school district should and does hereby accept the retirement and resignation of the superintendent intended to be effective June 30th, 23, and approves reducing the contract term of the current superintendent contract to 1 year.
I'll second.
So do you call the roll, please?
Kara?
Yes.
Christie?
Yes.
Steve?
Yes.
Allison?
Yes.
Jeremy?
Yes.
Tim?
Yes.
All right, the next item before the board is the review and discussion of the superintendent's evaluation. The superintendent is required by policy to be evaluated on an annual basis. We have submitted our evaluation tool to the Nebraska Department of Education. It has been approved in the various 7 areas. I'm pleased to report that every board member last year completed an evaluation. And I'm very appreciative of you, Dr. Hawk, for offering to meet with anybody that had further questions. It's my understanding the former board president met with you in December and reviewed both areas of strength and areas of opportunity for growth. And I'd like to invite you to discuss your feedback, excuse me, from that meeting.
My apologies to the audience for just nodding my head, but yes to all of those questions. And there were 7 different standards that go along with this evaluation. And certainly communication is something that I need to improve and will continue to strive to improve on such. But I thank the board for conducting that evaluation. Thank former board president for meeting and sitting down with me and going over that evaluation. This is not something that is an action or an approval item. It is simply to comply with policy and making sure that the public knows there's an evaluation.
Thank you. Any discussion from the board or questions? All right, the next item, I believe, is to discuss and consider qualifications and a timeline for the superintendent search consulting services. I know there was some feedback from public forum this evening on this topic. It sounds like we need to find a time that Dr. Rock, you've requested proposals from various search firms, and you provided us information on that for the board to review. We should have gotten that last Monday. And so we need to set a time to walk through and discuss how we want to proceed with the search firm process and set a date and time for a special meeting to address that.
Yes, that is correct. There are 6 different proposals, and they vary not only in cost, but in some of the services they would provide. It would be, it would be up to the board as to how they want to go about determining what those search firms, how they would evaluate those search firms. And then I would recommend that a limited number of those, not all 6, but a selected few, 2 to 3, would come before the board, and that would be in public, and make a presentation at that point in time. The board would then determine which of those search firms would be moving forward. From my understanding, that this can take anywhere from 6 to 8 weeks to complete before interviews and a contract is settled with a superintendent of schools. And so as we look to do this, there will be ample opportunity for public input. And as we move forward, it will be up to the board how they want to determine how to gather that input and how they would interview for that next leader of Bennington Public Schools. In order to get to that, the first would be to set a meeting to then solicit those that the board wants to make that presentation in front of the board. There is a little bit of time that goes along with that. You must give reasonable notice to the community, and reasonable is usually something that is a notification in the paper. In order to do that, it would be difficult to do anything prior to Thursday because of getting with the paper tomorrow, publishing the next day, so on and so forth. So probably the closest you can do, or the quickest you could do anything to interview search firms would be Thursday, possibly Friday, and moving forward. So there is a motion, and it's relatively blank. Determine a date and a time, and then once that is set, then we will work with those search firms to bring them forth to the Board of Education.
I know we talked a little bit about schedules last time. Does the board have a preference in terms of like the balance and need to give notice to the community in case they want to attend the special meeting, provide some insight to them, but also understand the pressure when get the process started to get the superintendent search beginning. So is there a date and time that somebody would like to throw out, and we could kind of check schedules and then we can follow up with a motion?
I was just gonna throw out Monday, just to kind of keep it consistent, Monday evening. Monday.
And I'm out of town next week.
Yeah,
All
that's
next
EMC
week I'm
term.
out of town, so.
Okay,
Do we want to do it before Monday, or do we want to push it back to Tuesday? Preferences?
I mean,
Are you out of town all week, is that
all
what you
week,
said?
yeah, Sunday
next
to
week?
Sunday, so
Okay.
Friday, I mean, I'm good this Friday. We can make that work, or if
Okay.
you guys want to push it
I was
forward.
thinking Friday, was Friday good for everyone? I don't know that it may not work for me.
Okay, but, okay.
Or Thursday, if you guys want to do Thursday.
Sounds like Friday is probably the best, and then Karen, you can maybe get one of the other board members if you have insights on the remarks to the group. Do you want to set on a time? I know Jeremy mentioned 4-6, is that what you're asking
Yeah,
for?
Girls basketball team's at 6, so I
Okay.
don't know what time boys too. That's Norris.
Yes,
Friday.
so Christie, your work schedule for you,
I can't get here till at least 4:30,
okay,
so that doesn't give us a ton of time.
No.
We might be able to get by before.
let's just do 5 on Friday, and we'll do our best to accommodate the basketball schedule, knowing that we have to sometimes figure out a way to do it all. I know, it's not easy, so, do we have a motion then for a special meeting to be held on Friday, Okay, 21st, at 5 PM. The purpose of which would be for us to interview superintendent search consulting firms.
Yeah, I make a motion for Friday, the 20th at 5 PM to hold the special meeting to discuss the search consulting firms.
I'll second.
You asked for seconds. I'll second.
Perfect.
Are all the firms gonna be there then?
No.
Oh, okay. You're talking just one maybe.
I think we're gonna
We're
discuss.
just gonna
the plan
discuss.
and just-
Okay,
yeah.
all right.
If we get several from there, that would be ideal.
That's what I was like, okay.
All right, Joe, you want to call the roll?
Allison,
Yes.
Jeremy,
Yes.
Tim,
Yes.
Kara,
Yes.
Christie,
Yes.
Steve.
Yes.
All right, the next item before the board is to discuss, consider, and take action with respect to the Bennington Public Schools Foundation Board of Directors. And there are two new individuals that are being recommended for appointment.
That is correct. Through the bylaws of the foundation, the Board of Education must approve new members. So there are two, Tara and Kim, and they're separate motions. You can combine because it looks like their term is the same.
It looks like we also need to address, we typically have a liaison that works, that's a member of the Board of Education that attends the foundation meetings and can actively report back on happenings with the foundation, so we also need to appoint someone there. I would like to recommend the appointment of Christy Ryan to serve in that role this year. I think your education background would prove beneficial to the foundation if you're willing to serve in that capacity. Is that what your schedule? Okay.
And
We
again,
need a motion for that.
yes, these are not in any order, so if you want to go ahead with Christie Ryan in that motion.
I move to appoint Christy Ryan to serve on Board of Education Liaison for the Bennington Public Schools Foundation Board of Directors for a one-year term beginning on January of 2023.
Second.
Judy, you call the roll on that one, and we'll do the other two.
Jeremy,
Yes.
Tim,
Yes.
Kara,
Yes.
Christie,
Yes.
Steve,
Yes.
Allison.
Yes.
And again, these, the next motions, there are two motions, but they can be combined in one as two leads, one motion.
Is there a motion for Tara and Kim?
I move to appoint Tara Gufford and Kim Roby as member of Bennington Public Schools Foundation Board of Directors for their first full-year term beginning January 23.
Thank you, Tim. Is there a second?
I second.
Is there any discussion? All right, Jody, please call the roll.
Kara,
Yes.
Christie,
Yes.
Steve,
Yes.
Allison,
Yes.
Jeremy,
Yes.
Tim.
Yes.
All right, the next item is for us to discuss, consider, and take action on the new state mileage reimbursement rate, which for 2022 is 0.625. We apparently do not have the board policy on a specific item, but you're asking for a motion.
I am, because it's a part of the negotiating agreement. And so I think it's best that the board approve a motion to change that.
Is there a motion, and we'll have discussion?
I move to adopt the state mileage rate for district reimbursement to 0.655 as set forth as the state, from the state of Nebraska.
625?
Yes, I misspoke, that was last year.
6.5.
Yeah, it's 6.5.
6.5?
65 and a half cents.
Oh, up top. I see it.
2023 rate. I misspoke, I said the 2022 rate.
I was looking at the 2022 too. I'm like, what are we talking about?
Thank you, Kara, for catching that.
Thank you, Kara.
Is there any discussion on that item? All right, Jody, call the roll.
I need a second.
Oh, second.
Christie,
Yes.
Steve,
Yes.
Allison,
Yes.
Jeremy,
Yes.
Tim,
Yes.
Kara.
Yes.
This is an announcement to the adjournment.
Okay. So we need to set the time and date of our next committee meetings, and then if it's okay, we'll just have folks convene outside of the meeting at another time and just schedule and try to set up a committee meeting, so hopefully recurring the week before the board meeting. We have a time and date for our special meeting, so our next regularly scheduled board meeting is February 13th. Do we want to set a time? Does people prefer 6, people prefer 5,
6 o'clock works well for me.
6? 6 work for you, Tim, Jen?
Yeah.
Kara? Okay, so 6 PM on February 13th is our next regularly scheduled board meeting. And please don't forget our special meeting, which we just discussed tonight, which will be on Friday, to discuss the superintendent search firm, for those that are interested.
Fine.
Yes, 5 PM. I believe that's it. Is there a motion to adjourn? Is
So.
there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
This meeting of the Bennington Board of Education is adjourned at 6:51 PM.